Water Energy Nexus program, we're going to start with two short presentations, and then we're going to open it up to the three questions that that we did have on the board, and we'll bring them back for that program. Those are going to be for the audience. We're going to start with Commissioner Sandoval of the California Public Utilities Commission.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Kevin. And thank you to the governor's office and to Aqua for co-sponsoring and for convening us here on this very important topic of water technology and how we could use technology not only to address the drought, but to help manage California's water resources and energy resources. And we're here this morning to talk about the Water Energy Nexus, a very important topic. I am Catherine Sandoval. I am a commissioner with the California Public Utilities Commission. I am also the assigned commissioner for the CPUC's proceeding on the Water Energy Nexus. So I'm very pleased to be able to speak to you about this. Okay, where do I point the clicker? Okay, we're moving. Advance. Okay, there we go. All right. So, so this slide I think is very useful slide that depicts where we are, and wanted to thank. Actually, I was a judge at a Apps for Water hackathon that was sponsored by Imagine H2O, and so I thought this slide really helped depict where we are. So this shows how California's water has been stored, snowpack, reservoirs, and groundwater. Snowpack depicted by the white peaks, appropriately enough. And so you see that part of what has happened is when you consider the snowpack 2015 as to say 2011 or 2006, the diminishment of the snowpack has been incredible. And so one of the messages here, when you look at actually how much snowpack we have lost, it is a tremendous volume. And so we really need, through conservation this year, to be the snowpack, right? So, so it didn't snow. So our goal should be to save as much water as would have been produced if it had snowed. Right? So if we can collectively be the snowpack, I think that's our goal. The other thing that I say to people, because I recently had to give a presentation in Los Angeles, and I was thinking about that. All right, but we were in the South cities of LA, in an area where, because of smog, you often can't see the mountains. And I never saw snow until I went to college, and I'm from Los Angeles. So a lot of people from LA can't conceive of the snow. So we hear a lot about the El Nino that may be forming, and the U.S. Geological Service and Weather Service is saying it's getting stronger. That's what they said last year. The El Nino never panned out. So my other request to you is that we need to be El Nino and to save as much as that El Nino might produce. So regarding conservation, one of the things that the California Public Utilities Commission approved in April and in May was pursuant to the Governor Brown's drought declaration. We ordered the investor-owned water utilities to implement several measures to address the drought, and not only to implement the conservation measures that have been mandated for each of their communities, but also to take bold steps. And we invited bold proposals to address the drought. So we heard a lot about measurements, and one of the things that we really asked the investor-owned utilities to do was to identify the outliers. And I think that's also an important theme. You know, often when we talk about water, we talk about energy, we talk about averages, average use, average household use, et cetera. But what we found, and what we asked also the utilities to look at, is to examine their customer base to address not only average, but to address the outliers. Because you find, and I asked this question to the investor-owned water utilities, okay, is it the top 10% of your customers who are really using an inordinate amount of water and where we would have the potential for big energy savings? And they all said no. It's the top 10 people. These top 10 people use tremendous amounts of water. And there's been some research, for example, Professor Loge has done some research working with some of the other utilities and some of the other districts looking at a aggregated and anonymized level water use. And when you look at the top 10 customers, they are materially different from everybody else. The top 3 customers use twice as much water as number 6, each of them individually, and number 6 used twice as much water as number 11. So addressing the top users is absolutely critical. And so that's why we ordered our investor-owned utilities to take bold steps to deal with that, including, for example, not only all of the regular stuff, but mandatory water audits if people don't cut back. One of the other things we asked them to do was to consider making available customer-funded meters, because we talked about the mandate for metering infrastructure. So there are many places, even in urban California, that still today do not have meters. Many of them are here in Sacramento County, where they're still on flat rate. So the state, we are working together to accelerate the meter installation process. But most of our water meters in California are not smart meters. They're not advanced meters. They're analog meters. And so one of the frustrations that we heard from customers was, we live in a Fitbit world where you can know about every step. Now you can know about every heartbeat, but you don't know about how much water you actually used for 2 months until you can get your bill. And so there are certain meters, for example, that you can strap on, you can attach to the other meter to make it readable in digital format. And those cost about $300. The back office support is actually not too much per customer. And when the people in the Los Altos sales heard about that price point, they said, paid more for my Apple Watch, would be very interested. So this is something that would be important to look at as we go forward. And one of the things that I will be proposing looking at as we look at the meter replacement program. If people don't conserve, we also authorized our investor-owned utilities to consider things such as flow restrictors. We hope we don't have to go there, and limits on total water use. So focus on the outliers. And this is also important because when we think about all of our uses for water, and you're here to talk about the water energy nexus, water is tremendously important to energy. So this is a picture on the top of a cooling tower. This is actually Calpine's cooling tower for their geothermal facility. And this geothermal facility, which is a tremendous resource for our state, bordering on Lake County and Sonoma County, has really been re-energized through the use of recycled water that is put into the ground to help to recharge the steam and produce tremendous amounts of energy. But it also has to be brought in and then to turn the turbine, and then they have to cool the water. And to cool the water after it has been heated, you need about 30,000 gallons of water a minute. So you see the flow there. That's what 30,000 gallons of water a minute looks like. So this is very important and something that we have been watching along with the California Energy Commission, because most of our plants, anyone who's running a turbine needs water for cooling now, unless you're able to do air cooling, but most of them still use some water. And so having water access is critical to being able to run. So last year, there were a couple of plants where they had rights to water, but the river that they had rights to ran dry, and so they couldn't get any water, which meant they could not operate. So we're able to do a bunch of things in coordination with CAISO and the California Energy Commission to be able to get them water, or to have them stand down for a couple of days and rejigger the system. But when we talk about long-term system risks, this is a critical risk. The other thing the previous panel mentioned too was alluded to was the price of water. Okay, to put some numbers on that, and I think this is also a risk and a consideration as we look at the use of water and energy. In only 2013, if you had to buy an acre foot of water, the going price for an acre foot of water, Jack Hawks, was about $250, right? And Last year, the price for an acre foot of water got up to about $2,200. All right, the last time that I checked with people in May, an acre foot was going for about 1,000. Everybody thinks that by August, unless things get dramatically better and this magical rain continues, that the price will be about $2,500 an acre foot, 10 times what it was in 2013. And I heard from the Santa Clara Valley Water District that at this point, we have already drawn so much water out of our groundwater basins and out of the basins that are being managed by the different water districts that we really are into the scarcity price of water. And if that El Nino doesn't come in the form of either the one God sends us or the one we create through our conservation, right? The scarcity price of water next year, everyone projects, and I heard this from Santa Clara Valley Water District, is $8,000 to $10,000 an acre foot. So that is going to change our economics dramatically for anyone who needs to buy water, including energy users. All right. So when we talk about water and energy, not only do you use it at the end of the power plant, but also there's a tremendous amount of energy that is used for water, right? To move it, to pump it, to clean it, to heat it, use it, then to clean it again, pump it, and move it. So you have actually in the United States, the energy sector is the single largest user of water, and also in the state of California, water is the single largest user of energy. So there's a tremendous interconnection and resource. So I'm also privileged to be here after just yesterday visiting with the Yurok tribe and the Karuk tribe up on the Klamath River. So this is a picture of me and my chief of staff at the Yurok tribal headquarters. So we were there for public participation hearings and workshops related to the proposed sale of Verizon's landline assets to Frontier, and they serve this area. So you see a little bit about where our water comes from. So what happens in our watersheds is important. And even up here in this magnificent area, several of the tribes have declared a drought. And in fact, we were also visited with the Hoopa Valley tribe. They just lifted the boiled water alert there because their river levels were so low, they were having algae growth and then had to engage in a boiled water alert. So there are a number of ways that we can think about how can we save water and save energy. So we have a variety of current measures that have been mostly focused on hot water. And there are some cold water measures. And again, the number of things that have been implemented because of the change of standards. But part of what we're also considering is how can we better deploy our energy efficiency program dollars, which are run by the California Public Utilities Commission, and also the Energy Savings Assistance Program for low-income families to be able to address the energy-water nexus. So when you look at, we heard a little bit about cold water measures. Toilets use 30% of all indoor water. And when you look at old toilets, not only do they use 5 to 7 gallons per flush, but when you talk about leaks, toilets are one of the big sources of indoor leaks. So a leaky old toilet can use 200 gallons of water a day. A constantly running leaky old toilet can use 2,000 gallons of water a day. So considering this as a measure to save water and energy is huge. So real quickly, one of the things we've been doing in the CPUC proceeding is developing a cost calculator that looks at what it would be the cost effectiveness of saving water when you consider the embedded energy in water, the energy to get it, and then the energy on the other side to treat it. And so this is just an example of a run that was done with our cost calculator that is now up for public comment. And it's a comparison between the previous prevailing model, the E3 model, and then the new model that incorporates the energy analysis, including the treatment of water on the other end. And so what you see as you look at the numbers in the bottom is in all of these communities, these are all in Los Angeles County except for one, that the cost effectiveness of addressing a suite of water measures goes up tremendously when you consider the embedded energy in water. So this may allow us to address a variety of cold water measures, including not only toilets and other indoor uses, but also potentially outdoor uses. Because as was discussed before, when you look at water that is used on the residential side, 30% of all residential water is used for toilets. And but 50% of all residential water overall is used outdoors. So considering both our landscaping and the efficiency of our landscaping is critical. So I'll also end with this slide, and then I hope we can discuss this more as we talk about technology. And as we talked about technology and what would you wish for, in the previous slide, not only meters, but also that you need people not only to get to adopt smartphones. Okay, the magic is not, oh, let's just send information to everybody's smartphone and we're going to be good, right? What we need also is communications infrastructure, especially in California's rural areas, especially on farms, but also in a number of rural areas. So I had the honor of meeting just yesterday with the Yurok tribe, the Karuk tribe, and the Hoopa Valley tribe. And, one of the things that they talked about was their frustration. Once in a while, they get to go to Eureka, and they said, I get to visit the 21st century. But we're in an area where now they finally have a touch of cellular because the tribes have put up repeaters, but it can only support about 5 people at a time, and otherwise there's no cellular. But also we had heard from the Hoopa Valley tribe that they were having problems running their SCADA system and that the broadband was inadequate to support their SCADA system that runs their water system. Well, because we're able to go into the central office, we understood why, right? We talk about the internet as virtual, but it is profoundly physical. It is a bunch of wires out there and conduit and also backhaul to get back to the internet that determines what is going to be available and what's not. And when we went inside the cabinet, what they had in there was beautiful looking phone lines and some T1 lines that provide internet access of 1.5 megabits down and about 1 up, and no DSL. This is not about just ordering something or adopting something or getting a smartphone. The infrastructure isn't there to support them. And so that is absolutely critical. And we can talk about there are some federal funds to support that, the Connect America Fund, the state has various funds, the High Cost B Fund, the California Advanced Services Fund. So making sure those funds are deployed to support our rural areas, including our farms, is absolutely critical. Because when I was a judge with the Apps for Ag Hackathon, everybody had to design their apps to assume that you might start out in a place with some sort of internet access, go to a field with no access, where you also couldn't communicate to anybody else unless you could shout at them, and then you would go back later on and be able to upload and download. That is the situation in a lot of the fields today. So the number one thing that we have to address to enable all these cool technologies, okay, drones may be helpful, but we have to address the communications infrastructure to enable water and energy saving and economic development for California. Thank you.
Good morning. I appreciate everyone being here. I'd like to thank Kathy for Commissioner Sandoval for setting context and for her tireless activity, particularly going out to some of our more remote locations and to visit those Californians. So again, I'm going to try to very briefly frame up the conversation today. We have 3 questions that we're going to turn back to deal with. And so what I'm going to do is talk about, we're talking about the water energy nexus, so I'm looking at it much more from the energy perspective, but it is certainly very clear that saving water saves energy and vice versa. So anything we can do in that area is a double header. Now again, with some nuances, and we can go into all the technical details, and I'm not going to. So in terms of, just in terms of context, I would point people back to the governor's statements in Toronto that we are dealing with a situation where our climate is fundamentally disrupted. And we're in the 4th year of a record drought. That may well be related to that. It may be natural cycles, but there's also, it's very clear California now is warmer than it has been. It's also, and we see that in terms of fires, but we also see that in terms of snowpack. And there have been some who have said that you can look at the correlation between very dry and very hot years at this point. And again, we're hoping this is the last year of the drought, but we are planning that it goes another year. So the basic messaging for people has been to say, when we're talking about the 25% savings, it's not to send water to someplace which is using it wastefully, but it's so our cities are ready for next year. Otherwise, we may be in the Brazilian situation of having to cut off water. So again, let's start at energy. I'll cover the parts, particularly the governor asked us to handle this year. Starting with the first slide. Good. And there's a blow up here, and it's also online for those whose eyes are older. But anyway, as Commissioner Sandoval said, power plants need water. And so when we permit every power plant in California that's over 50 megawatts, or at least since the Energy Commission was established 40 years ago, and our permits specify exactly where the water comes from. And right now we're in a state of change. And we need, one of the things the executive order does is give me the ability to move quickly if I have to allow them to switch the source of water. So in terms of this chart, oh, it doesn't. Okay. Basically, the table list for our power plants goes through the largest power plants, ignoring the ones with coastal water, or ones through water, basically where the water comes from, how much of it is recycled water, how much is direct, and the amounts of it. And it also identifies the source of the water for the power plant. So so that allows us to go through and say, okay, we know this water district is cutting off its irrigation flows, and to the extent the power plant was getting water from the irrigation flows, we need to figure out how to get water to the power plant. The other connection, and again, very briefly, I'll let people stare at the chart, is one of the things is we've had subsidence. We are having more subsidence now with the more groundwater pumping. Some of our power plants are in areas where the ground is subsiding. And so, again, you can go through the chart. Certainly welcome everyone to come up afterwards and read the legends. But you can see where there are power plants in subsidence areas, which obviously have to worry about making sure they're going to get the water they need and that they can still operate safely. Let's look at the next slide. So the Energy Commission has been around for 40 years. We celebrated that in January. This is actually my second time in state service. The first time was in the first Brown administration. And one of the things we did there was really look at how to be very innovative and creative in the areas of energy and efficiency. And one of the examples of that is we do building and appliance standards. It's probably been one of the major things we've accomplished. And in terms of building and appliance standards, you can see some of the impact of that on refrigerators. And basically, what this chart shows you, and again, this is replicated around, is that generally refrigerators now are roughly as large as where they were before. The price has come down dramatically, and the energy efficiency has also energy efficiency has gone up dramatically. So this shows that with innovation, the sorts of things we have done in the energy space, we need to do that now in the power space, or in the water space. Okay. And in terms of, again, looking at why I say we need to do that, this is just looking at cumulative water storage changes over the last 12 years. And you can see that we are getting much drier. There's much less water. And again, it's much hotter. And, that certainly leads to any number of issues. But we need to be, from the energy side in terms of fires and other things, but we certainly need to be more efficient in our water use. So again, now looking at some of the technologies we're thinking about, there are lots of as we've looked at energy, there are technologies we have been developing that also help in the area of water. And again, I won't walk through these, encourage everyone to come up and look at the poster there. And then finally, I'm going to talk about one of the things which we were directed by the governor to set up was a water energy technology program. We have a booth outside. I guess in terms of the people working on the program, would you stand up for a second? Thank you, Laurie. And again, I encourage everyone to talk to us on the innovative ideas, the basic process we're going to go through. We're having public workshops. This is, as described on the left, we are gearing at trying to take commercially available technologies and scale those up. We're walking through first on ag. Obviously, ag is one of our most hard-hit sectors. Then we will go through residential and commercial industrial, and then we will look at reclaim. Again, we're looking for your ideas. You can certainly look at the poster board here. You can go back there. We have it on our web. We have it on our web in several languages, so we're really trying to reach out comprehensively. But again, with that context, what we're really trying to do is, let's go back to the questions. So we're really here to listen to you on ideas, and particularly to talk about each of those ideas, so we report back in the general session about some of the input and we got in this discussion. And we have a microphone. We have 2 microphones. So let's start out with the first question and your feedback. Thank you. Peter, please.
Thank you. So there are lots of pieces to this puzzle, obviously, but just sort of a quick question. We know that saving hot water in homes is especially beneficial. You get the water savings, you get the energy savings as well. Presumably, saving cold water in water districts where there's a high energy cost of providing that water, either through transfer or their system is just particularly water intensive, would also be a benefit. So saving a gallon of cold water in LA, because you don't have to pump it over the Tehachapi's, might be a better efficiency improvement than saving a gallon of water in a Northern California basin where you don't have that same energy cost. Is there any effort to integrate that issue, the energy use of different water agencies, in order to prioritize the kinds of programs we're implementing?
That's exactly what Commissioner Sandoval was talking about on the computer model side. You know, the reality is we have a variety of programs with different funding sources. And one of the things we have, again, on our webpage, is we have some money under the water bonds, we have some money under greenhouse gas, and we also have some money from the utility programs. Now, on our particular program is tied to greenhouse gas funds. As you know, we're being sued in that area, so we're being fairly conservative. There is a concern if you save cold water and it just goes down the block and is used somewhat later, you're back to how much you're saving. But anyway, we're probably, you know, the Air Board is probably being overly conservative there, but we also have 3 tranches of funds, so we can try to maximize the effectiveness. So you want to talk about particularly the funds you have?
Yes, thank you. So a couple of things. So one, so this chart, and Jamie, are we making our PowerPoints available online as well? So when you look at this chart, I know this is like micro small, but we can get it to you. This is an example of what happens when you run the cost effectiveness model. So if we could possibly pull up the slide with this chart. So yes, there it is right there. That's the second one right there. So, so part of the reason why you have dramatically higher total resource cost, right? With the old model where you don't consider the embedded water and energy, when you look at city number 1, for example, okay, that's one of the least effectives where the total resource cost is 0.01. So you put in $1, you get 0.01 back. When you consider the embedded energy and water in that city, in Los Angeles County, you get 1.28. Look at the next city where you get $22 back for $1 in. All right, so what this does, and that we allowed in the model, is that the model is broken down to consider not only the embedded energy in water by hydrological region, but also to allow sub-hydrological region inputs by the water agencies. So whether it's an investor in water utility, also a municipal utility, a mutual, a water district could input their data, and then it's designed to create what I call a data garage, so that then you can see, okay, if you want to do measures in Inglewood, how is that different than doing it in Whittier or doing it in the city of Los Angeles? So Los Angeles and San Francisco are both two examples of why that's really important to go below the hydrological basin. All right, so both Los Angeles and San Francisco don't get their water from that particular hydrological basin. All right, San Francisco gets it from Hetch Hetchy. And because that system was built over 100 years ago, it is gravity fed from Hetch Hetchy until it comes to East Bay, which is the first place energy touches it, and it's treated and then comes into San Francisco. As a result, it uses dramatically less energy than the rest of the region, which primarily relies on the California Water Project. The same thing happens in Los Angeles that gets its water from the Owens Valley. So if you were to blend in Los Angeles City with the rest of the county, things would look less efficient. But the reality is, in both San Francisco and LA, the city of LA is not sharing with the people in Whittier or the people in Inglewood, right? The city of San Francisco is not sharing with the city of San Jose. But if you're able to look at your real
let me
use-
encourage Peter to go through your model and having a really detailed much more detailed conversation on it. Peter certainly loves data and loves computer models, and would probably do a fairly deep dive just out of curiosity. But let's go on to the next question.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joseph Rizzi. I'm with Natural Desalination, all about using nature to desalinate all the water we want in California. If you're using nature to power it, then you don't have all the issues that you're dealing with. If you're using I have 5 solutions I'd be happy to give to you.
Well, please put them on Energy. The Energy Commission website has a place for people to put ideas on that, and certainly we will. Well, right now, in terms of our program, I should have said, we're waiting for the legislature to adopt a budget for the greenhouse gas funds, and that would also adopt our programs. And they may well revise those, but at least at this point, we are set up as best we can to go immediately. But until the legislature acts, we're not doing it. That's all we're doing. So we'll certainly encourage people to put ideas in. The table's out there. Talk to Laurie, but let's go on to the next question.
Bob Hitchner with Nexus eWater, another technology provider, and trying to figure out how to get over the chasm. We have a great technology. We take it to builders. We do home water recycling. The builders say, well, solar power was around for 30 years and it never took off because there was no easy way to take it off mortgage and sell it to the buyer of the home. And it was actually the development of innovative financing and innovative and other types of support from the state, which created a market where builders could easily sell solar panels to new home buyers. So the question is partially about technology that we're looking at today, but it's also about what kinds of incentives are we going to be supporting as a state to make water efficiency just as reasonable to builders and to home buyers as it is in the case of energy.
Certainly, we at the Energy Commission do building and appliance standards. We've, in fact, in the 70s, did standards that resulted in the low flow after the 77 drought. Under the governor's leadership, we put in place standards on shower heads and toilets, which was that first big step. Under the governor's direction, we adopted emergency regs now. And certainly as we do building standards, but again, we have to make sure that the technologies are commercial and cost effective. And again, our standards are based on water. There's probably ways we can do utility incentive programs, right?
So I was going to follow up on that as well about the question about the budget. So part of why this is important, I went into some detail, is that if you can get the total resource cost effectiveness here, then we may be able to get access to the CPUC energy efficiency budget, which is $1 billion a year. So the Energy Savings Assistance Program for low-income Californians, right now, the unspent funds 2009 through 2014 are $319 million. And then we have another program cycle of $300 million. So we're also going to be targeting multifamily homes, and then so you may be able to access some of these incentives as we've developed a tool now to document the potential energy savings from a suite of water measures, including cold water measures.
Great.
So this is based on energy savings, and of course there are separate programs through our oversight of it. We oversee investor-owned water utilities, but a number of other agencies, including the water districts, have programs that are targeted at water savings, as does the Department of Water Resources and the Water Bond and
Right.
State Water Control Board.
Next question?
So,
Wait, we have one here with the microphone. We're going moving on.
okay. Hello, Jim Walker, recovering energy commissioner, and currently working with Focal Line Solar for desalination using solar thermal. One of the things that, as you know, I've been involved in the wind industry for probably 40 years, and one of the two things that really helped a lot was the first report by the Bush administration, 20% wind by 2030, and then the Wind Vision report. And in those, for the first time, we developed a supply curve for wind, from the wind resource, what was going to cost. And I would imagine desalination is at the high end of the cost realm for water, but it would be very helpful to have something along those lines that both showed you the price and how much was available, and also something like the McKinsey charts, which show you the efficiency, the cost, levelized cost of various efficiency measures as well.
Well, when I was in Irvine, they were pointing to some charts they were attributing back to Peter Glick that were water supply costs. So if you want to, Peter, microphone, quick. Yes.
Working on a report that does that, that looks at the cost of different supply and demand management options to try and produce a cost of conserved water and a cost of supply options. I would guess a month or so.
And yeah, so one of the things we can try to do is make sure that we get a link up to your website. I probably should note that Commissioner Walker and Peter are alike guy. We recycled brownies from the first administration. Next question.
Is there a rough thumbnail sketch about the water savings, energy savings for cold water vis-a-vis hot water? I know it's going to be incredibly fact specific, but are we talking like a 1,000 to 1 difference or 100 to 1 roughly? Because I think as a general matter, squeezing waters, well, I know from what we do consumer water research for universities and down the end use level, squeezing water savings from hot water, you're talking like, gallons a day maybe, versus with sprinkler systems, for example, you're talking thousands, or plus gallons.
Well, I think the reality, and Commissioner Sandoval's done a good job of explaining, is very fact specific. Again, I don't know if either you have a general guideline, but I think the basic answer is depending on exactly where you're talking and what you're talking about, you can have at least a factor of 10, right? And if not larger. So again, but with this new tool, you would be able to identify the locations which have the highest payoffs.
I would say if you look on aggregate, most of our water use is cold water, right? In farms, for the most part, they're using cold water. And you have both toilets and also lawns, right? Toilets and turf are the big ones, whether you're talking residential or a lot of commercial office buildings. So a lot of our water use is cold water. So there's a huge amount of energy that's embedded in that, but how much there is varies, and that's what this tool helps you to figure out. And so you can use this tool if you want to look at either a particular measure in a particular region or a suite of measures to figure out some of that efficiency. So it's available on our website. The tool is out for public comment now. We are anticipating putting out a proposed decision to ask for approval of this tool by the end of the month, and we anticipate the CPUC voting on it in August, which would then enable people to use this tool to access the energy efficiency dollars.
Yeah. No. When is the filing date for comments end?
Soon. So yeah. So but Get it in. So this
Get 'em
month
in.
would be great.
And I was going to say, Commissioner Sandoval's advisor, if you want to stand up for a second, she can certainly give you information on how to file, what the website is, and
Okay, so
you can-
this is Jamie Ormond, my legal and water advisor, and she says you can also Google CPUC Water Energy Nexus, and then you will find the information. What you want to look for is the cost calculator tool. Thank you.
okay, next question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
The question is actually for Commissioner Sandoval. I am breaking my head a little bit in understanding what proportion of total water is going for agriculture. I know it is untreated, sometimes it's just coming from streams, rivers and underground pumping. But of the water that we are using, how much we are using for agriculture, how much for industry, how much for residential. Then we can see effectiveness of where the biggest return on investment might be from new technologies or new solutions.
My understanding, and my colleagues from DWR and State Water Resources Control Board can also help with this, but it's approximately 85% for agriculture. And this is part of why, for the California Energy Commission, for the program that Governor Brown authorized, that the first target is agriculture. So agriculture is a huge part, and then Jack Cox, do you think commercial industrial is larger than residential? The residential would be larger. So residential would be the next big tranche, and then commercial industrial. So that's why it's agriculture. And then for commercial industrial, there's a variety of uses there that are more specialized. For residential, the big things are turf and toilets.
And I was going to say, I think the Pacific Institute also has those sort of things up on their website. Next question.
Yeah, I wanted to address what I think is a clarification that's needed in all of this morning's discussions, not just this one. And it starts with a quiz question, and that is, when we have an El Nino, is the winter going to be wet or dry? And the answer is yes. So if there's been 6 big El Ninos since 1950, 4 of them were wet. And if we look at all of the El Ninos, in general, it's about a 2/3 probability that it'll be wetter than normal, but it's a 1/3 probability that it'll be drier than normal. And there are some complicated climate modeling reasons for this, but if you do a web search, which I just did, on California Nino, the hits you get today, going all the way from the Daily Mail to the San Jose Mercury News, are salvation is on the way. And the thing is, if we have a big El Nino and it turns out to be dry, that's a perfectly defensible scientific result to have. So
No, I would note that the Northwest this year had average hydro, no snowpack, none. And so again, you get back to the question of how much water, but also how hot or dry is it? Yeah, and I think to be responsible, we have to be planning for worst case, hoping for best case, but we really have to be ready. So if this repeats next year, like I said, we have parts of Central Valley which are cut off, in terms of water. We're busing water in. People don't have jobs. We're busing food in, and when you look at our migratory animals, we may well lose the salmon because of the warmer water. And we also have, we had 9 bears in Bakersfield in December that had to be moved. So, as you look at these various sightings, these animals are looking for food and water. So I guess what I'm saying is we really have to be planning for worst case. Next question. Sure.
Add on that when we talk about subsidence, that the risk of subsidence and the issue is not just in the Central Valley. you know, and it's not just an ag issue. Of course, it also affects a lot of towns and people, but it is also currently a problem and a priority in San Jose and in the Santa Clara Valley Water District. So they have a history in that area of subsidence back from the ag days, and then after World War II, in the growth of the Silicon Valley area, they were having subsidence again, which is why the water district was formed. So what has happened is that over the last few years of the drought, they've had to draw from their groundwater basin in order to meet the needs of this growing area of the Silicon Valley. And now they've gotten to the point where they need to reduce their withdrawals, or else we're going to have big time subsidence in the Silicon Valley. And this will be a harm not only to water resources, natural gas pipelines, buildings, all sorts of things. And for example, the south part of the San Francisco Bay touches the north part of San Jose. As you reduce the groundwater there, you reduce the pressure, then the salt water from the bay could come in, and then your freshwater basin is now a saltwater basin. So there are very big long-term issues at risk.
Oh, yeah. No. So we have 3 areas. One is opportunities, the other is technologies, and the other is basically deployment strategies. And I've been encouraging people with the technology options to really get those into the public record. And we've talked a little bit about the opportunities. Now, again, what other than grants, what are the ideas on how to increase deployment? Oh, yes. Wait for the mic.
I'm sorry, if there are no grants, etc. for technologies, the technologies have to rely on funding sources directly from the government other than through grants. Namely, such large projects that would make difference. So people would partner, even if they don't partner, and state has a knowledge of a technology that will work. It is better. One of the ideas is pumping salt water from semi-brine or ocean areas up to very high temperature areas, and then allowing that to evaporate and condense into water that can certainly be used for agriculture.
Okay. So again, that's another technology. How about?
Yes, I'd just like to say that Richard Harris, East Bay Mud, and in a number of areas, I think the data that we're going to be collecting through modeling is going to be very important. But what we should look to is 2 things, I think, is we've got to enhance and remove barriers to public-private partnerships and continue to look for that. And the other thing we need to do is grants will be a piece of the solution, but I think we need more revolving loan programs like CalConserve. We need some other mechanisms. So when a community sees a $22 ROI, then how do they access financial markets in addition to the technology to make that happen?
Okay, we heard earlier about some of the needs on infrastructure on water districts like yours. I mean, how much trouble do you have getting the capital to make those investments?
I guess the answer is a yes and a way. It's usually a matter of, and our general manager, Alex Coates, spoke to this about the perception of the cost and the value of water and what we're investing in. But there are limitations to what our policymakers can adopt and what we can fund in a bond market. So I think it's a combination. We are fortunate to be large enough that we have some good bond market sales for our capital investment. But what we find is at the end user, where we know that's where the water energy nexus is at its greatest. And we really need that partnership because we're just providing a service, but we really need that engagement on operating, maintaining life cycle. We need those capital and financial instrumentations and that private-public partnership to address that end use.
Okay. How about you, ma'am? We need a mic down here. Oh, over there, please.
Martha Davis with the Inland Empire Utilities Agency, and I agree with Richard very much that, some of this really comes back to even the low interest revolving loan funds, if you look at what's happened with recycled water at the State Water Resources Control Board and the way in which those low interest loans have been able to lower the cost of financing of those big projects, it's a huge tool. I think the other thing, and I think this is what you're working on in the programs with the funding from the Cap and Trade program once the budget's made available, I do like the pilots. I think that part of the issue here is not having the technology available, but not really understanding how to use it cost effectively in your own community. And those pilot projects, I'll use EBMUD again, they did the Water Smart. We're all looking at what they did with the social norming project with the assistance of Frank Logue from UC Davis and trying to figure out variations. We're using OmniEarth right now on trying to figure out, is there a way to use the technology to better understand today what the water usage is, and then your Fitbit analogy I love, because we don't have this real-time information that would help the end user do what we want to do. So a lot of the opportunities for increasing the deployment is actually deploying the technology so we can learn from the examples that are out there. And then that'll speed, I think, greatly the successful projects become then the ones that you want to tie back into what are some of the funding grant opportunities or revolving loan opportunities.
What's your sense on, do you have specific public-private partnership models that would be useful in this context?
That's an interesting question. We've done it certainly in a lot of the larger infrastructure investments where we've done on the energy side, say the solar, or we've put in wind projects with partnerships. We've done a fuel cell using our methane gas as part of increasing, from our standpoint, it's increasing the percentage of renewable energy that's in our water treatment process. So it's another variation on how do you look at this relationship between water and energy and realizing it isn't just efficiency, it's the quality or the type of energy that's embedded in the water. But I think there are the work that we're doing with the OmniEarth and the work that we're doing at a regional scale. So one of the projects we've been working on through SAPA, the Santa Ana Water Project Authority, is bringing multiple agencies together and then saying, if we together will invest in certain types of technologies, are there ways of driving down the costs of the implementation of those projects so the per project cost really comes down? That's a form of leveraging that's going to be very helpful.
Okay. Right here. Please bring the mic up. Get a mic over there. That one, good.
Hi, my name is Marty Laporte, and I completely agree with the pilot study model. While at Stanford, the program studied and piloted various technologies, including AMI, weather-based controllers, and pint urinals. And in all three cases, not only did the industry improve their products because they learned from the pilot, so it was a mutual benefit, but we learned a lot from it too. And so I would completely support that. Now, some of the funding can be from the industry itself because they do benefit. And also, I wanted to point out that the integration of these technologies, not the urinals, but the AMI and the other data providing information for water is really important. And so as piloting some of this technology, looking at other ways that it can be, the technology and the data can be actually more efficient is really important because people don't have time to look at separate dashboards and separate databases. So having that be more useful and easy to use makes compliance and makes efficiency much easier.
Okay, now Stanford always has had a very strong historic link to venture capital companies. Now, how do we access them as part of the innovative? What are you doing to really help move, again, into that space in terms of funding?
Well, the funding that I had was actually departmental, so it wasn't venture-backed at all. So within the department, but one way that it did benefit other water agencies in the Bay Area is that we brought that information through group talks and through presentations, so other people benefited from the base information and the pilot studies and actually tested some of that technology and improved on it themselves.
Okay, great. And if you hand the microphone to him, and we'll go over there. And then you're next.
Jim Walker again. If you're looking at deployment, I think you might want to take some lessons from the spectacular success of encouraging deployment in the energy sector. And this involved two things. One, creating demand, even if you have low-cost financing, if you don't have a customer. And so the RPS, or the storage programs that drove significant procurement, were very good. Also, a standard contract that's very easy to implement, no transaction costs, and basically financeable.
Great, thanks. Go ahead.
There's been Barry Nelson with Western Water Strategies. There's been a fair amount of discussion about public funding, like your water energy program, tremendously important. But PPIC's analysis of water financing suggested that around 85% of water investments come from utilities themselves, not from the state and federal agencies. So the ability of utilities to make those investments is challenge number one. Alex Coates mentioned the opportunity during the drought for water agencies to persuade their customers to accept more realistic pricing that gives the ability to deliver more reliable supplies, as well as the ability for agencies to adopt fundamental water technologies and develop the next water technology. So I would sort of bounce that question back. The State Water Board held a workshop recently about water pricing. Commissioner Sandoval, a question to you. How do we take advantage of the drought to enable our water agencies, both IOUs and public agencies, to price water at a realistic level that allow them to make some of these basic investments as well as developing the new technologies?
Thank you. So the CPUC has a proceeding for which I'm also the assigned commissioner called the Balanced Rates Proceeding. So if you just look at CPUC Balanced Rates Water, you'll find information about that proceeding. And so we're going to be looking at not only the pricing of water, but a variety of factors that go into it. So 70% of the costs of any water system are fixed and only 30% variable, although what's happening is really the twin problem of conservation also means that you're selling a lot less water. So in the past, a lot of water conservation techniques in terms of rates have tried to encourage conservation by having very high rates as you have increasing consumption. Well, now that we are pushing conservation, then you're able to cover less of your costs. So one of the things that we're interested in looking at is how do we make sure that the whole system works to provide safe, reliable service at just and reasonable rates. And I think that my personal view is that the point, it's not all about price, and it is certainly not about just jacking up the price so high that you make people scream. Because one of the things that we also find with these people who are very high water users, the outliers, their water bills are $800 every 2 months, and they're used to it, and it's not a big deal for them. Their energy bills are also $800 a month, and they'll pay that, and that's not a big deal for them. So this is part of why in the energy sector we just adopted a couple of weeks ago with the rate reform. There will now be a super user charge for people who use more than 400% of baseline, and that we're also looking at what can we do to help those very large users structurally change. And this is part of what we're talking about with energy efficiency. How do you embed structural change through standards, through energy efficiency, et cetera? So price is one factor, encourage your participation in the balance rate proceedings. And I think this is something that also the municipals are starting to look at as well, because they need to invest in their system, for example, to help to address leaks and aging infrastructure. And we have a program ongoing for that at the Investor and Utilities.
Okay, we're being tugged. I'm going to take one last speaker, and then I'm going to ask one question to Ashok from LBNL. So you give that gentleman, put your hand up and ask for the microphone. No, not him. This gentleman here. But you go ahead.
Okay. Aram Shumavan with Kovala. I actually wanted to attempt to answer the question and really spur both of you on to the extent possible. It sounds like you're saying exactly what I wanted to hear, which is you control procurement. The utilities spend a lot of money on things, and there are many ways to leverage through procurement regulation a lot of that effectively. You control rates, which is the way you're going to reach the VC community, because you design rates that accurately reflect prices, and you're going to see responsive markets in that. And then through programs, which both the PUC and the CEC effectively control through Title 24 and things like that, you have the ability to ensure that those levers in coordination are actually manifesting themselves with downstream savings. And so it's great to hear that you are asking those questions. I just strongly encourage you to coordinate the levers as efficiently as possible. That's something we've been working a lot on in the More Than Smart process that's folding into the DRP, and similar analysis in Water and Energy Nexus would be very effective.
Thank you. Now, so my question is, we have one of the world's leading scientists here and group leaders at LBL, and so we're talking about commercialization. So one of the things I want to understand is how much money is DOE putting into research on water? And how do we get more?
So Department of Energy, Washington, D.C., has something called Water Energy Technology Team, or the WET team, which is focusing on funding a multilateral program in many dimensions related to water energy nexus, because Department of Energy also recognizes that water energy nexus is critical to the future of the country as a whole. We are responding to that program, but a call is not out yet from Water Energy Nexus team in terms of filing for what we call the annual performance paperwork. Okay, what DOE has already put out a call for is a Water Energy Nexus collaborative with China, and that's a minute program of only $12.5 million over 5 years on the US side, to be matched by $12.5 million of funding that we have to raise inside the US, so that's $25 million. And then under $25 million over 5 years on the Chinese side to collaborate on forward-looking new technologies which should be actually impactful in not the kind of time frame we are thinking of, like what will happen next year if the El Nino doesn't rain on us, but thinking about 5 or 10 years from now. So that's why I've been quiet, because I know that this is a far more urgent deadline that we are discussing than the research portfolio we are addressing, which is 5 years out or 10 years out. But we have a rich portfolio across the University of California campuses with which we applied to DOE for the China collaborative. And even if that doesn't come through, we would like to explore opportunities for the UC consortia as a whole to be the brain trust to the state of California, because we are your brain trust in some sense. We are publicly funded, right? So we would like to explore that for sure.
Your point on timelines for these things, I would point out that when the current governor was the youngest governor, we had a drought. And now that he's our oldest governor, we have another drought. Now, I don't think either of us anticipate being back a third time, but who knows? So
thank you.
With that, we have to wrap up. Thanks for everyone's participation. Go ahead. Oh, wow.
So
That's good. That's good. Hi. Oh, we haven't. Sure. Hi. Actually, if you talk to Laurie Stenhope in the wet booth out